Hello, everybody. We are live. The timing of that whole 10-9-8, I'm still trying to figure that out, but that's okay. I see me and I see my awesome guest. I'm so excited because you're right. We had some great conversation before we went live. Next time we are going to record that, John Michael. Um, my name is Tina Durbin. I am your podcast host for Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard. Although some people have said I should change that to Voices Now Heard. This is a podcast and a platform for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. And I have a dear friend that we met under interesting circumstances, shall we say. And yet we are both here pushing, surviving, thriving, overcoming, and doing all the good things. This is my friend John Michael Lander. I'm going to have him tell you his story. So, John Michael, I still start with the same question. Tell us a little bit about who you are, where you've been, and where you're going. Although where you're going, we'll say for that last sip of coffee toward the end of our conversation. But I want to give you a chance to tell us a little bit about your present and your past. So take it away.
All right. Well, hello, everyone. My name is John Michael Lander. I'm a former Olympic bound diving athlete and a sex abuse survivor. As a 14-year-old Olympic bound athlete, the adults that were entrusted in my training groomed me into silence and trafficking and caused one of the most exciting times of my life to be filled with shame and guilt. Although I still did go on and win the gold medals at the Norway and Danish Cups, and I may be having some friends pop in and out of here for a few minutes. My pups. So they're my
That's okay.
ESAs.
They're
They are
part of
my
the
ESAs.
conversation tonight, so that's okay. We want to see the babies.
We'll show you to them. And so my story was all the way through high school. I was trafficked by a group of professionals who thought that they could help me with my diving career. And they basically groomed my mother first, which she basically gave them the permission to take me. And that's where the whole story is. So that's my experience with life. It took me a long time. I denied it. I was in total disbelief. As an athlete, I normalized everything. This is what it was to take. This is what I had to do to become an Olympian. And so I believed everything that everyone told me. And I didn't question it because I was told not to. And so that became my whole mantra all my life. Um, when I graduated from high school, I went out to the University of California, Irvine on an academic and athletic scholarship. I went into pre-med, and I thought that I had gotten away from the traffickers. But what I did not know was that they were still talking to my mother, and they were still paying for certain things. You know, what the scholarships didn't pay, they were paying for me.
Mm.
And so I had, as well as you know, Tina, if we don't get the professional help that we need, we will sometimes repeat actions and put ourselves back into the situation. And that's exactly what I did. I somehow upset a grad student. And so he started stalking me. And he did this over months and left notes and cards. And eventually he got me where he wanted me. And again, another one of those events happened. I woke up in the next morning in the wooded area on campus, and I had to go to the medical center. And that's when I first started to understand what it was like to be a survivor, because going to the medical center and having the disrespect given to me because I was a male. How did I allow this to happen? What was I wearing was the question that was asked to me. And why did I allow this to happen? And so that was my experience. And I really got sick after that. I totally broke down. I never understood that I could go 4 years through high school with all these professional people passing me around. But it took one grad student to break me. And so what had happened is my mother contacted the lawyer who started this whole thing, and they brought me back home to Ohio, put me right back into the center of the traffic. And I went to school here in Ohio. I went to a local university, and there was a dance teacher there. And we started talking, and she started hearing more of my story and started asking questions. She was the first person that asked me what was going on. Even though I gave indicators to a lot of people, she's the first person. And so she started this whole thing about helping me escape. I hate the word escape because it
I
sounds
know.
so funny.
Well, let's say to free yourself from the manipulation, because that's
Yes.
what it is. It's the grooming. It's the, because John Michael, I look back and, there were lots of relationships where it was a normal dating, a normal breakup, a normal we're done.
Hmm.
But why has the last one, why had it been so difficult? Well,
Wow.
it's because we were groomed, we were manipulated, we were sold a book of lies that we bought hook, line, and sinker. Because, Joe Michael, I don't know about you, but I believe people are inherently good and that they think like me. And one of the biggest pieces of this puzzle is that somewhere along the line, I lost my innocence to the world
Oh,
the way
yes.
I once saw it, and that takes away a lot.
You're absolutely right. I agree with you. And yet, when we're in the middle of it, we don't see that. We can't
Mm-mm.
comprehend it. I know that my teenage brain was not able to understand all the events and what they meant. I struggled with that every day. I started making up stories so that I could feel better about myself, just so that I could go to school the next day.
Mm-hmm.
And so I made up all these lies and I started to believe them. And I think that's one of the things that happens a lot with survivors is we create this false self.
Mm-hmm.
And we are the reason. We end up thinking that we caused this whole thing. This is our fault. And I've heard that said by a lot of survivors. And it's true because our brain really doesn't know what's right or wrong. It will only take what we tell it. And if we continually to tell it the same thing, it's going to believe it as true.
And for the longest time, I kept thinking, when I look back, I carried the shame and the blame, but I carried some of what I had to do to survive
Oh,
as
yes.
part of my personality, and so part of it was, well, I just must be really stupid when it comes to men. I must be really dumb when it comes to relationships. Why did I ever believe this, and this, and this? And now I realize I had to separate. And this is what we were talking about before.
Right.
I had to separate his abuse and his lies, cheating, manipulation, and all that stuff from my healing and my accountability for my own trauma, which led me into the relationship. And, buddy, that's a fine damn line.
Hmm. Well, and if you think about it, Tina, and when we're in the middle of that, I don't think our minds are able to comprehend what they're doing. Our
Mm-mm.
mind is so focused on surviving and just getting through the moments and getting through this experience so that I can see another day. Because I
Right.
never knew when if they would turn around with a gun or with whatever, who knows what they had in their hand. All I knew is that there was this group of professionals and they would pass me around to other people, and they would take us to these parties where they would have 5 or 6 of us boys sitting in a line, and they would come down and they would look at us, look us over, and ask questions, and then go in the back room and have silent bidding. They'd have a silent auction in the back, and then the one who had the highest, gave the highest bid came out and took the boy for that evening. And there was also the fact that if the boy who raised the largest money, the largest donation, got also another prize. They would either get money or they would get something else. So it was always constantly under this umbrella that they were doing us good. They were helping us. And that's what and I know this sounds crazy, but I think a lot of them believe that that's what they were doing, that they
Yes,
were
I
helping
do.
us.
I do think there is a level of, there's something about their own grooming
Oh,
that then that's where trauma begets trauma. Hurt people, because, you know the forgiveness piece has been difficult, but I've had to forgive myself a hell of a lot more than I'll forgive the abuse. But I also realize that many of us, we lead by our trauma. We interact with others based on who we are, where we've been, and where, not only where we're going, but where we'd like to get to.
Right. And
And
also
that,
by what we identify ourselves as.
yes,
And then our mind creates what we think that identification should be, and that's how we start to act.
and they
So
feed it. The manipulation feeds it. And that is where I can do a lot of things. I can say a lot of things. I can be a lot of things. I can believe a lot of things. And I can do wrong things. But I'm not out here manipulating people to get what I want.
right.
And I also had to separate that manipulation from my own accountability, but also what we were talking about earlier. You can't remain a victim.
Right.
And
I think a lot of times, a lot of survivors, when they're in the midst of what's happening, don't think that they're a victim or don't identify that idea of what they are. They're too busy, and I know I'm talking about myself being a teenager going through this, and I was too busy trying to act what I thought normal was,
and
and
John
try to
Michael, I
preserve my
was
life.
50. I was 50. That plays
It
into,
did.
you see,
It-
you were young
right.
thinking you're trying to figure it out. I thought I had it already figured out. And I went down the path of what the hell we doing? And so while you were naive and innocent in your own way as a young person, I have to own the fact that I was naive and innocent at 50, but that's not how I saw myself at all.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with that, because if you
Mhm.
think about it, I like to see the term of nice and innocent, as we're going to use those two words, is that
True.
person that we came into this world as, that pure person. I think we're all brought into this world equal, and we all have the potential to be whatever we want. And it's what we get, all the information and the downloading we take into our heads, the grooming we get since we're born from our parents, from our relatives, our friends.
Religion,
Religion's a big one.
politics, education,
And,
the whole thing.
and we take it all in, and we start to create this world that we think that we understand. And unfortunately, sometimes those thoughts aren't real. And sometimes those thoughts are lies just to help us understand, to be able that we can get through the next day. So it's a constant battle. And so we start using negative self-talk to make our brains feel what we think our brains will feel better. It was easier for me to say that it was my fault, that I must not be a very good kid, that I created all this and I really wanted it. If I could accept all that, then I could go the next day and go to the next date or the next event, because that's
Right.
what it was. That's what I
Right.
was told, and that's what I believed, and that's what I told
Mhm.
myself. So that I could show up. And people, I think that's the hardest thing I've noticed now, because I remained silent and didn't say anything until later in my life as well.
Mhm.
And I thought I had just created this whole thing up in my head until I started realizing things and going to the group there where we met. That was a big eye opener for me.
That was big.
We talked about COVID and how COVID really made me become introspective. And I started to learn more about myself and started realizing that these were not just images I created. These were real. And like what we talked about earlier, Tina, we talked about owning the story, not necessarily owning what the other person did or their actions. You can't own what they do. That's their story. That's their life. But owning the fact that this has happened, this is what really went on. There are a lot of blank spots still, but this is my story, and this is what happened. I journaled all the way through high school. I have all these things telling me what was happening, but at the time I couldn't see it.
Well, and we disassociate. I mean,
Totally.
part of it is, I realize now that, I bought into this illusion because I was taught from the time I was a very young girl by my parents I could be whatever I wanted to be in the world and I could change the world, and that somehow loving someone and nurturing them was a supportive role, and take the back seat for your dream, and you find a partner and you build that team and that dynamic duo, and that's what we sometimes see portrayed. And then you realize very early on, I realized in the relationship, the most recent, that he was the star and I was the supporting role. But the supporting role meant as I explained to you earlier, I just kept shrinking. I
Right,
just
right.
kept shrinking into disappearing, and I couldn't figure out why it is that everything I was doing was not enough, was never enough, was not right enough. But then I realized that I didn't set boundaries for what was truly mine and could have been mine in the relationship. I just took a back seat and let it ride.
Well, you also got to realize that's what we were told, and that's what we saw in our movies and TV everywhere around. The woman always supports the husband. And I
Mm-hmm.
think that's a big thing that women have got to understand. And if you were spoken and if you put boundaries down, you were considered a bitch, you
Right,
know, and you were uncooperative. You were not all the things that we were supposed to be.
right,
Or I shouldn't say we, because I put myself in that situation as a a victim myself. I always put myself in the powerless position. And we talked about even going into therapies and stuff like that, where we walk in and as a survivor, we give over our power so easy to the therapist because we're taught that they know everything and that they're going to help
right.
us. And we want help. We agreed to that. We walked in with our story and said, I need help. And that's a big step. And we got to
That is
pat ourselves on the back that we said, wait a minute, I need to do this for me. And then we go in there, and then all of a sudden we just give over our power to this person who has initials behind their name, and we expect them to give us a tool or something that's going to heal us
and
without all the
that's why I think Survivor's Corner had such an instrumental role or an integral role between that and the pandemic, because there were so many voices in my head all my life that tried to tell me who to be, what to do, what to believe, what to think, what to feel. And if it wasn't what they thought, then it was dismissive. And yet at the same time, you know, stepping into your trauma means that you have to own it. You got to dissect it, like you said, all those layers of the
Mhm.
onion.
Right.
And owning your trauma and then moving beyond it into a healing space, it means that no one no one can tell you when to share it or how to share it or where to share it,
Right.
or not to share it. That it all, again, like you said, we go to therapy and we give that power away. But as a survivor, you got to hold on to that power. But that power can become defensive, but it
Oh,
can also
totally.
become very healing.
Right.
But
And
that's
I
again a fine
also just
line.
right. And I just want to go back there before you can own it, you have to find a way to tell your story. You have to describe your story to yourself. So then you can
Yes.
paint this picture. And there's many ways to do that. You can draw, you can journal, whatever you want. There are ways to do that. But you have to get that story to be told to yourself first.
Yes.
And you have to
Yes.
hear it. And you
Well,
have
and
to
they
have that
say
dialogue.
admitting it's the first step. For a survivor, it's awareness. It's awareness that something was done wrong.
Right. And I think I think it instinctually,
Mhm.
I think a lot of times, especially with men, we're told we're not supposed to talk about it. We're not supposed to have those kind of feelings or thoughts. We're men, we get over it, we just deal with it and move on. But and
Right.
I think the little child in all of us wants to tell someone,
Mhm.
and we
I agree.
want to be able to share that story and be believed in sharing that story.
That's
And
key.
so
That's key.
once we start to dissect this and figure out, hey, a clue for me was when someone came up to hug me and I would flinch. I didn't realize I did this. And here I
Mhm.
was, an actor in New York, and there I am on stage, and the person comes up because we have to hug, and I flinched. And they're like, "Why are you flinching?" I'm like, "I don't know." And those
Right.
little clues, our body will give us the clues because the body doesn't forget. I don't think.
No.
I
The
really
body
don't
keeps
think.
the score. There's a book.
Yeah,
The body keeps the score.
and
Yeah,
it
because
knows.
when I look back, I realize that I was groomed so much by my parents' marriage, which I thought was good, even though it had flaws. So when I saw the flaw, I just dismissed it and said to myself, well, as we grow and as we learn and as we, become more of a settled couple, some of those problems will disappear. Because, my father cheated. My mother was a stay at home mom. I had done all the career stuff and was ready to do the nesting stuff, which I never really had a chance to do. But all these things groom you. As we've talked about, they groom you from the time we're born. We are groomed
Right.
for gender roles, for education, politics, the whole thing.
Everything.
And it's hard to separate that.
Well, it's hard to separate it because you did a great example there. You started talking about how you thought everything was supposed to be. So in essence, what you're doing is grooming yourself on top of being groomed.
Yes. Oh,
And
my.
I'll tell you, I get flack from survivors about that all the time. They don't want to look at the fact that we are doing to ourselves sometimes worse than what was done to us. You
Yeah,
know,
because Harriet Tubman, I just shared this quote. Um, she said she could have freed many more slaves had they understood they were slaves.
right?
The mental slavery, the prison in our own minds from what we have been groomed to believe, and then what we add to it. That can be. I think that's part of what keeps you stuck in an
Yes.
abusive relationship because you want so much what you want and you want so much what you have invested in and what you have believed in, and now you're going to go tell someone, well, I was wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
like like yeah, greatest guy since sliced bread turned out to be nothing but a heel. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. It's true. But I think also one of the other things we have to do as survivors is forgive ourselves instead of
Mm.
beating ourselves up because we did become our own re-victimization predator in a weird way. We're the ones that kept the story going, if that makes sense. To be stuck in that re-victimized position. Because once the abuse is over, the physical stuff is over, it's the mental, like you just said, that we do to ourselves, and that we start to strapulate and start to figure out, oh, this is happening because of this. So we start making up these scenarios. What if this and what if that? We start just so that we can think that we're okay and that we can move forward and that we're doing all right. We got to forgive ourselves for that. And
It's
we
so we
talked
can get
earlier.
up the next day. It's so
Oh yeah,
we can get up the next day. I mean, listen, we ended, when I was in the abusive situation, we ended every night with, baby, it's okay. Tomorrow is a new day and we will reset and regroup. And I'm thinking to myself, what the fuck am I resetting and regrouping? I don't recall having done anything. But yet, I owned it.
you
Okay,
did.
baby,
And the other
tomorrow's
thing
a
that's
new
really
day.
interesting here, and we've got to make sure everyone understands is that that becomes our normal. that becomes our safe haven. That is why so many domestic partners go back to the abuse, because that's safe. That's what I know. I know what to expect. I know how to walk on eggshells. I know what to do when something goes wrong.
I'm
I
an
know
expert.
exactly. But to stand up on my own,
Mm.
and another thing I realized that I had a lot of problems is I couldn't make decisions,
Oh God,
especially
yes.
in a
Oh,
relationship. I was always whatever you want, because I didn't want to hurt the relationship. And I wanted to make sure that everything was good and that they were happy. Because if they were happy, then they would stay, you know,
right.
and which is really counterintuitive to what I was doing in my life. Because here I was at 15, 16, 17. Yes, all this stuff was happening, but I was also an athlete and I was making decisions and I was going to,
Right.
world
This was your
games.
career,
And I was like, I don't understand. I can make a decision here. I know what dives to do. I
your
know how to do
dream,
this.
right? Mm-hmm.
And yet over here, I can't do this. I'm trapped. I
Right.
always felt trapped.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
always felt that the medals I won were not mine. They were someone else's.
They had been
I
earned
always,
by everyone who had invested in you. Yeah.
exactly. And they bought it for me in a way. I
Mhm.
wasn't worthy enough for it. And those old thoughts keep coming back. And you
Right.
have to realize that and hear them, and you have to change those thoughts so that you can make it a more positive. But that's another whole other talk. But
Listen, so how did you begin, I guess I mean, I know like we talked about, Survivor's Corner allowed me to tell my story, separate my truth and my trauma from his abuse and manipulation. And the fact that I had the power to share the story or not share the story, and being public and helping others, that is always who I've been, because I don't think that you should. And I realize now how much he compartmentalized. Like the church knows one thing and people know this
mhm,
something else. And I realized, I was like, that's weird. Why aren't you just aligned? Online, offline, friends, family. How come people know different things? But yet you don't tell everything to everyone. And so I've always been an open book.
mhm,
But now I realize that open book also allowed him in so close so quickly. So, how do you balance that? How do you balance the what from the forgiveness? Because I've had to forgive myself much more than I could ever.
right.
I don't want to say find it in my heart to forgive him, but I have to forgive myself. So, how have you, I guess, because at some point you do have to compartmentalize and you do have to reconcile it all, because it's all us.
Right, right.
The good, the bad, the right, the wrong, the real, the bad, it's all us. So, how have you dealt with all of that, John Michael, over time?
Well, I will say that the group that we met was the first time I ever in a group with people. And that
Mm.
was a big deal for me. And that was a big icebreaker because I knew I needed to be around other people and hear stories and share stories and be a part of a community. I think that was a big step for me. Again, I held all this in for a long time.
Mhm.
I didn't understand why relationships weren't working. I didn't understand why jobs weren't lasting. I didn't understand all these things. I just thought I was not meant to be. And I think the thing that I started realizing is when I got to the point where I knew that I wrote a letter to my partner and I said goodbye to our two Boston Terriers and I went into the garage and I was going to just end it. This was it. This is it. And while I was sitting there inhaling the fumes, I all of a sudden, I know it sounds so corny, I had this thought that this isn't fair for Nathan to come home and find me like this. He didn't ask for this. And so here I am who feel broken and I'm going to break someone else. I didn't want to do that. And so
Right.
I just pulled myself up. I went into the living room, fell on the floor and bawled like I've never bawled in my life. And I finally just so exhausted, I said, I'm not doing this anymore. And that's when I started to break my silence. I said, I'm going to share my story. I went on and did a TED
Yeah.
talk, and I went on and started writing books about things about my story. Those were the first things. And again, I wrote my story, my books in fiction format. I couldn't write about myself. I couldn't say that this is me, but I
Right.
could use this other character and I could write about him. And that opened it up a lot easier for me. Since then, I've just started to explore things. And one of the things that really have helped me, and it was, well, animal therapy, which I hope we get to talk to a
Oh,
little bit.
yes, yes.
Will.
Well,
But
yeah, because I got to talk about Phoebe Ann.
that's right. Was actually being introduced to the Self-Talk Institute. And when I went to them, and I was like, I had gone through so many therapists. I felt re-victimized. I felt nothing ever happened. I found ways to manipulate the session so I could get out of there earlier. I would do exactly what they asked me to, but no one went deep enough to find out what the problem was. And so with that, I just started realizing, I was told the first day, we are going to take you where you are right now. We don't need to know what happened in the past right now. This is your story. This is what led you here. Let's talk about your story.
Mm-hmm.
And so they started listening to me, and they would ask me all these different questions. And all of a sudden, all these patterns started to show up. All these I'm not worth enough. I'm not smart enough. I'm not this, all this negative talk. And so they would have me start writing those down. And then they would have me change them. And then they would have me listen to some positive self-affirmation tapes, which helped. But it was the thought in my head that I wanted it. And it's when we want it and we want
Right.
to do something, we will. You are an example of that. You talked about being in your 50s when all this started, but you started to realize this is not right. You started to hear that inner voice inside of you saying, wait a second, we've gone long enough on this. This isn't working. What are we going to do about it?
And I started, prior to leaving the abuse for a long time, as you mentioned, I was silent. I didn't want to make him look bad. I didn't want to, whatever. And so I just kept quiet. And then along came, as he was love bombing another,
Oh, man.
and I was home alone, I started realizing I wasn't as anxious. Like, he was gone. I was gone all day. He was gone all night because he was love bombing another and manipulating another situation. Of course, while I was still paying all the bills. And I realized, I feel calmer.
Yeah.
I can do the dishes and make noise and I'm not being screamed at. And then I started opening up, not to people that I knew at the time.
Mhm.
I found myself opening up to people that I knew 20 years ago, that
Mhm.
knew me long before I knew him. And they would remind me, Tina, that doesn't sound right. And as I can see where self-talk would be a positive thing, because as I heard myself talking to
Mhm.
other people, I realized this is a crock of shit. What in the hell is going on? And then I could start to separate mentally, emotionally, before I separated physically. I started to figure things out. And the
Right.
more I started to analyze, I do believe that at some point in time, you have to remember who you are.
If you're brave enough to go there,
Yeah. Yeah.
you were
Oh,
brave
yeah.
enough. And you need to celebrate the fact that you were brave enough. And
Mhm.
we all have that in us. I really believe. We
Mhm.
all are meant to be our full potential and everything. And to be
Mhm.
able to hear yourself and notice those things that are not lining up properly,
Mhm.
the negative self-talk, the thoughts that keep coming in and keeping us in that situation, because we would convince ourselves, or I'm talking for myself, I would convince myself that if I was the best at this and this was my job, this is what I could do the best, be perfect at, everybody will like me and everything will work out. I just have to be patient. And unfortunately, when we talk about forgiveness, I have a hard time
And
with
you're
that word.
twiddling your thumbs going, why isn't anything changing? What is
It's getting worse. It's not changing for the better. And I do have a problem with forgiveness because I always equated
Mm,
that with religious
me
things.
too. Me
And
too.
my father would tell me, would preach to me and send me all these thoughts, and I never thought that I was allowed to forgive anybody,
Right.
because I would definitely, in the eyes of God and in the eyes of the church, what's happening over here with the professionals, I was a sinner and I was going to hell. There was no
Right.
way around it. Although what I was doing was also helping the family get all the medical examinations and the medicine and everything that the family needed, because every time I would go out, that's what they would do. They would take care of the family.
Right.
So it didn't make sense, like you said, and I didn't get it. But it's that fact that we finally get to that point where we say no more. And unfortunately, a lot of people feel that there's no way out. And a lot of people find a way to be successful at suicide and stuff like that, so that they don't ever get that chance to really find out who they truly were or are.
Yes, because that's the worst. I think that's the worst part about abuse. I know there's physical, I know there's sexual, financial, I know all, but abuse takes from you who you are. And if you are not careful and you do not move outside of it, and you somehow you just never find your way free from it, they could steal who you should be.
Right.
And
Right.
I've always believed, again, perhaps my own grooming, but I've always believed I've been destined to do more in the
Right.
world. And so for me, and call it religion, call it destiny, whatever, but I have healed so much now that it's almost like the abuse was the broken that crushed the seed open.
That brought out the beauty and the
And that
perfection.
and
Yes.
buddy and that's a that's a hard place to get to.
Yeah.
But I do believe that sometimes we are destined for more, and our struggles bring us there. Whether it's religion, whether it's God, I don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I
But
hear
I
you.
think some of us are destined to be more in the world. And and I know that this podcast came from a place of I know that I know that silence is is where some people are. And so for those of us who can share our story, there is hope in it for others.
Right. Because we can be the voice for others,
Yes. Yes.
so that they can identify something. It may not be the same story, but
No.
again, when we think about it, the abuse is over with. The actual physical abuse, the mental abuse that we do to ourselves, is what continues carrying us into the situation of not getting to where we want to go.
Right.
You know, and you are a great example of how you've taken this and you said no more, and I want to shout from the rooftops so everybody can hear it, so I can help someone, because I know someone's going to hear this somewhere along the line. Someone's going to hear this. You're doing a podcast, you follow through with it, you have that idea, and that's all successful. We've got to celebrate these little successes that we have. That doesn't seem like a big deal, you know. I have to share this. This is crazy because I deal with this all the time. But yesterday, an article from the Times Magazine has my quotes in it, and I was like, "What?" And of course, then I said, "Oh, I can't tell anybody because that would be bragging about it." But we got to celebrate that.
Oh no.
Yes.
You shout that, baby. Shout
Yeah.
that.
And we share that, and so that it shows that we've come from the same places. Abuse is abuse. We all know that, different ways.
Mhm.
I do believe that two people could be in the same room and be abused by the same person and have two different stories of how they interpreted that abuse. and how we continue to trap ourselves in that situation. And we need to find ways to get out of it. There are, therapies can work. There's a lot of therapies that can work. The other thing, I'm going to wrap back to what you had asked me, thing that really helped me were my pets.
Oh, look. And yes.
I tell you, pets are probably important, most important for me, because I was able to connect. With humans, I had a very cold side to me. I was nicknamed the Ice Prince all the way through, growing up. Everybody called me the Ice Prince because I wasn't warm. I was nice and polite.
You have that side eye, like,
don't get near me. Yeah.
Don't be messing with me.
But our pets don't get that, and they'll just come right up onto you and start kissing you and hugging you. And that had broken so many barriers for me. And it's important. And I have one sleeping right beside me right now. She's asleep.
Well, I posted all over, Facebook when I got Phoebe. I just saw a meme today. Greyhounds are an interesting breed. They're so laid back and chill. And, I saw a meme today that said Bond, James Bond, and then it's a greyhound going hound, greyhound. They're so, but, Phoebe, like the quote I shared with you and you shared in your article, and I want to say thank you so much. Phoebe Ann was a retired racer, or no, she was a retired lurcher, which we don't know if she was a racer. She has no tattoo, so if she was, it was illegal field racing. But she stepped me outside myself, because between the pandemic and Phoebe Ann and still living in the house where all the trauma had occurred, it allowed me to have a schedule that let me rest physically and mentally and emotionally. And, Phoebe with her head on my leg and a cup of coffee, honestly, I don't think I could. Right. I just like decompress.
You will actually literally start breathing in the same rate that they are if you have your hand on them. And I see that Carol said that her dog Angel saved many times, and it's true. And they have. There have been many times, and they sense it. If you really are connected with your pet, the pet will know something's coming in before it happens, and they'll start coming to you. I know that ours here, I have two of them from the same litter. They're twins and they're sisters. It's great. But they will start pawing if they can feel that I'm in distress or if I'm feeling that downward spiral. And I just have to look over, and it's a reminder, this is unconditional love, and and the fact that you create a relationship with them. You take
when you're home alone, you talk to. It was like,
oh yes,
what are you doing?
And they hear you, and they talk right back to you, and there's a whole communication. People think we're crazy, but that's okay. I'd rather be crazy.
Right. No, as much as I adopted Phoebe, I believe she adopted me. She, because there's this whole thing about, our racers retired or rescued. But I know that in my heart, she adopted me. From the moment I got her, she just was so in tune. And she was on my schedule. No, actually, I think I was on her schedule.
Yeah, I think we adjust ourselves to their
sleep till noon, and Lord knows I can. And so, it was such a comfort. Oh, look at that baby. Now, which one is that?
No, I have to preface this out really quickly. They're two female puppies. They're sisters. But this is Bandit, and the other one is Bear. They have boy names because they always start. Our dogs all start with B's, and we have Boston Terriers. But this is Bandit Louise.
Bandit Louise. Oh, yeah. And what's the other one's name?
Well, let me pull her up. This is Bear. Bear Abel. We don't know. We haven't come up with another name. Her real name was Teddy Bear when we got her, and we just dropped the Teddy and kept the Bear.
Isn't she sweet though?
She's a halubberbug.
Yeah, I really, I lost Phoebe just a few years. So I got her in like June of 19, and then I lost her in 21. And and that was, oh my goodness. And in some ways I realized it set me back a little bit because I had grown so attached. But
yeah, I hear what you're saying, because the same thing happened to me. I had 2 before this, and they both died within the same year. And the thing that was heartbreaking is that I felt more for the loss of the pups than I did some humans that I lost at the same time during the pandemic. And I didn't understand that for a while until I realized that I am able to love. And once I was able to realize that I am capable of loving, it totally changed and helped with the healing process. And we need to go back to one other thing real quick to remind us, is that we talked earlier today that once we have to not forgive, but to grieve the loss of ourselves. And once we are able to grieve, we can move forward.
Right. Yes, absolutely. And that is hard because, I guess part of healing is also holding on for a little while to the pain, because for a long time, it's the only thing that made sense. I mean, I was crying every day.
Right.
I was living in a house with an individual, and I was crying every day and could not understand why. Went down the rabbit hole of research because I was in a narcissistically abusive relationship. There had been no physical or sexual, there had been no physical component of abuse, and there had been no sexual intimacy. So for me, I realize now, though, that as much as there was mental, emotional, social, intellectual, and financial abuse, there was physical abuse and there was sexual abuse. It was indirect. And by that, I mean, because I was sexually abused at 10, and I've carried weight all my life, every time he slept with someone else, he poked me. He poked at my vulnerability and my weakness and my trauma, that I wasn't good enough because I was fat. So indirectly, that's my trauma and what led me into, because I do believe that we, as we've both said, we are groomed by our trauma and groomed by our weaknesses and our insecurities. And someone who abuses, that's what they use. The very core of who you are is what they poke at in order to manipulate and to control. And that's what you lead with, because that's who you are at that time. I know I'm not that individual anymore.
It's almost like a perfect storm. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Because they would not be able to do this to certain people. Certain people would be able to walk away from them. It has to do this. I feel like with my situation, it was a perfect storm. I was groomed very young through my father, and we later on learned that he was abused by the Catholic priest. And that whole story. So he was projecting that onto me, and there's this constant generational thing going on as well. So by the time it came to the professionals, I was in that situation that I had to be polite and be nice and da, which may have looked like weakness to them, but I don't really think it was. I think that's one of my strengths. It's one of my superpowers. It's one of the things that I held on to from a child up. And I think that's one of the things that helped me get through it. I think we find these little superpowers that we have, because I will tell you that by the third and fourth year, my junior, senior year, I found ways to turn the tables during the events. I found ways that if I came on to them and talked about how good looking they were and how I really felt attracted to them, that would really get them flipped out a little bit. They'd get really edgy because they had children my age. That would throw their brains a little bit. Then I would also go to the point that if I let them climax first, then it was never really sex. That's what I told myself, but I was in control. And if I didn't do it at all, boy, did I win. That was the win night for me. But the problem with all that is that two things would happen. One, the situation would happen really quickly and it'd be over with and it'd be done, or it would never happen at all because they got freaked out. And they would not go back and tell anybody because that would be embarrassing to tell the other guys, right? It's total locker room talk. They're not going to say that. The other thing was it would become violent. And then that was the chance that I had to take. I had to take one of the 12. But the point is I started realizing that I had this control, or I thought I did. And the other thing that was really confusing to me is that afterwards, when I started to realize that this was all these lies that I told myself, I felt like I was becoming addicted to self-abusing myself, if that makes sense. That kept me in that world that I was not good enough. And that's what became normalized for me. That became safe, because if I stay in this little circle, I'm not going to hurt anybody. And I was so afraid that I was going to end up hurting somebody else because of what had happened.
I have to be careful. I still have to be. See, I became a smartass. So I learned. I just made a reel today because my friend and I were talking about it earlier. You know, he would call me and say, "Where are you?" And I would say, "I'm where I'm supposed to be. Where are you?" Because he knew. He didn't care where I was. He wanted to know how long I'd not be home because he had some activities at home, some extracurricular activities. So I learned to be a smartass. I learned to show up wherever he might not suspect or expect. And,
see, and that's a way that you started finding your power again, and you started to realize I'm worth it. Little moments inside of you, and that's where that came out, and that's how it turned out for you, and it's different for everyone, and that's what's so powerful about it.
That's it. That's the turning point, because I told a friend earlier in the week, I said, I know you're not ready to leave yet, okay, because I know she's not there yet. Okay, right. Mentally, emotionally, she's just not there yet. And I told her, I said, I know you're not ready to leave yet, but that doesn't mean that you can't stay where you are and still put yourself first. And I said that because when you put yourself first, regardless of their antics and BS, when you put yourself first, that will begin to break away the mental and emotional slavery and move you into breaking away physically, leaving the relationship. But there can be a long road there, because we both know the cycle of abuse. It can go on and on and on, and you could be there 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. And I know some friends who are, but I also know that when you break away, it's really hard not to go back, because it's all you've known. It is all you have known.
It's your safe.
And you have excused it and you have dismissed it because you've learned. I tell someone and they dismiss it. So see, this is my smartass side. When people say to me, well, I can't believe that he is still bothering you. And I'm like, what part of the first 499 times did I tell you this was not a normal relationship? Did you not hear me?
Well, you got to also realize they don't want to hear you sometimes. No. Because if they hear you, then they'll start looking at their life and seeing, well, wait a minute, maybe mine's just as bad. And
Exactly.
that's the other thing that we've got to be careful about. It's just it's scary. It's
It
scary. And
is
to
scary.
make that move is so I'm being attacked. I'm being attacked. Make that move is it's risky, because any slight change they may notice. And so you're constantly, yes, I'm getting all these things, but I'm also still covering it up by I don't want him to notice or that person to notice. So I keep covering it up. And it's a constant cycle, like you said, and it can go on for years. But if you realize, if you go back and if you were able to record it all the way, you would see that these little steps start adding up.
Yes, you start to
get bigger, and you start to find your voice. And you may not do it directly. You may indirectly, you'll find a way, and then you'll start listening to yourself. And you'll start realizing this is not healthy.
Well, I remember the day that, walking on eggshells, and it was like, if I do the dishes, they're not, if I don't do the dishes, I'm in trouble. If I do the dishes, but I make noise, I'm in trouble. If I do the dishes and there's still some, some problem, it's like, I finally looked at him and I said, I got a solution. You do the dishes. I'll just leave them.
That's
and you do whatever it is you feel you need to do with them. And, and those were the things that you're right. It's those little things that you begin to think to yourself, buddy, you think you got, and you take back a little bit of power. Right. And, those moments, as you said, they add up. They add up. And eventually there's enough that adds up, you'll subtract.
You're right. And I think I like to think
good. I need to write that down.
Well, you recorded this, right? So you could go back.
Yeah.
Okay, good. There you go. What was I going to say? I had a great thought that just went out the window. Come back. Keep talking.
About the adding and subtracting. And then you.
Oh, yes. Thank you very much. I really believe that we've never lost our power.
It's true.
We have hushed it. We've covered it up. And, it kind of a crazy thing that this little light of my light, I'm going to let it shine. We cover it up. And we cover it up because we've been groomed to cover it up. We've been told to cover it up. It's still there.
Right.
It's still there. Those are those moments because it says, I need to be heard. I'm not going to be quiet right now. I'm coming out. And you're shocked too. You're like, whoa, I am powerful.
Right. Right.
And then that kind of makes you nervous too, because then I don't know how to handle this power. So I need to hush it back down.
And I was going to say, that's where, because I know you're in a direct sales position, and I am too. And, believing that, like, should I ask people if they want to buy something? Like, it's like, I want to ask, but maybe I shouldn't ask, because that's self-promotion. But you know what? I don't think we should ever stop promoting ourselves, because that's where our power is, John Michael.
Right. But we do have to stop making up answers for other people. Because when we're like, oh, I don't want to ask them because they're going to be so upset. We've made the decision for them. They haven't even had a chance to say no, because we've done it for them. So that is crazy.
Yeah. Well, I want you to take a moment because we're getting close to the last sip of coffee. So I want you to think about your final thoughts, because I'm about to do a shameless plug. So, I already have the 1111 Messages of Hope from Angels Endeavor jewelry, where the survivor gets to create the piece of jewelry and an angel pays for it. But Love Over Coffee is now a subscription box series. So inside this box, are items, knowledge, and activities to self-love, self-care, and heal trauma. So in this particular box, there is a candle, because I found that during the pandemic, taking moments to myself were really important. So this box has a candle in it. This one is February March's box. It has a coffee mug, self-designed. Someone else created it, but self-designed. It has an activity where you write a love letter to yourself. So there are heart stickers in here. There's a bookmark in here that has a Maya Angelou quote. And you don't have to be a coffee drinker, but it has a coffee charm on it. The quote is, "Nothing can dim the light that shines from within." So, again, there are lots of knowledge, activities, and items to help you self love and self care. Because until you self love, self care, you're trying to pour from an empty cup, and you cannot successfully invest in others or love others until you love yourself. And we know that logically, but we don't always know that emotionally. So box 2 is coming out. It's the May June box, and basically it launches May 1st. And on May 1st, then you have until the 10th to pay. And then once you pay, then everything will ship out around the 1st of June. So Love Over Coffee is now a subscription box, in addition to being a podcast. People put things in the box. So if you're a creator out there, this box has a pair of earrings that have an X and an O on it to remind you to love yourself. There's a crocheted heart that's a coaster. So I'll be live on TikTok later showing what's in the box. And I'm starting to organize now for the May, June. So like I said, if you're a creator, if you would like to, John Michael, because I know if there's something you wish to add to the box, a journaling prompt or anything like that, a QR code, some of your product, like a facial mask, anything like that, let me know, because that's what I'm looking to help other people grow, because I think that we grow when we help other people grow. But I also think that, again, putting into yourself means you can put out. And so I am looking for items, things to put in the box. So the next box is May, June. It has a summer floral theme. And the idea is that as much as we work to make the world beautiful by planting flowers, we should plant more inside so that our own garden can grow. So I'm going to stop there. That is my self-promotion, shameless plug. If you're interested, reach out to me, let me know, and I will hook you up. But
I think that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
Thank you.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
I'm doing a little self-promotion for myself here also. I have been so moved and excited and passionate about going through the self-help, the self-talk institution, that I have been certified as a trainer and a life coach. And I would love to offer anyone a free session. Just contact me.
Hello.
All right, we'll do it. And if there's something, if we could put that in the box, that might be something interesting.
Absolutely. Because they, a business card with a QR code that would allow them to go to wherever it is they need to register for that free session. Sure. I love it. Great. Absolutely.
And we'll figure it out. But anybody is on tonight would like to have a free session, we can sit down and talk. It's about a 2-hour talk, and we just go through some questions and we figure out little ideas that can help you. and then we go from there.
That's better than the lawyer who does the 20-minute consult and then charges you two
Oh,
hours, John.
it's crazy. And you can always email me, and it's johnmichael.lander@gmail.com, and we could share that one.
Okay.
And let's do it. Let's get.
Okay,
get
tell
it
me
out there.
again, John.
johnmichael.lander@gmail.com. I wish I could type it into the
Well,
comments.
I am right now.
Oh, good, because I can't do that.
JohnMichael.lander@gmail.com. Free session for self-talk
Self-talk.
and coaching kind of thing. Okay.
Perfect.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna put one free session. I mean, listen, you got dogs to feed.
That's right. That's right.
Well, and I was gonna say, John Michael, I might have to come visit. I'm coming for the cup of coffee, but I may have to come visit the puppies.
Oh, I would love that. They would love that too. Oh. And I see people had birds. They were talking about the birds over here in the comments.
I know Shirley has some birds because I have talked to her and I have seen those birds and I have heard those birds. Yes. So Carol has a pug.
I saw that too.
And yes, it's Shirley that has the birds. I do. I miss Phoebe Ann. I tell you what, as Carol said, she needed you as much as you needed her. And that's true. And I needed her as much.
I just thought of something else, Tina, just to share with everybody. There is a new site called survivorspace.org. And it's for survivors to go and help support other survivors. There's stories, there's videos, there's information.
Survivors what?
Survivor Space. Survivorspace.org.
Oh, okay. So no S on the end of survivors.
Right. So there's no two S's together.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's amazing. There's a lot of articles I have up on there. There's a lot of videos that I've done. Our article is on that space about the puppies and the animals that your quote is up there as well.
Okay. I love that because I think that, again, holding on to the pain, being defensive, trying to figure it all out keeps you in a space that's still very secure. It isn't until you can step outside yourself and love another. And that's where loving a pet comes in, because they are so gentle and so unconditional, and and you don't have to question their motives.
And they're a reminder that we can and are able and capable of loving.
Absolutely.
No matter what our back history is.
And I will post the article that John Michael helped to write. And it is a very interesting article. And it talks about all kinds of animals, not just dogs and cats, but it talks about horses and birds and lizards and okay, now listen, I'll draw the line at snakes and but although I'm assuming, because again, I think taking care of something else brings back that nurturing, because when you have not been nurtured, it's hard to know how to nurture. And when a pet needs you to help them to survive, you're feeding them, you're loving them, caring for them, taking them for a walk. Yes, Mish on here, if you can see her comments, Mish has a nonprofit where she cares for cats that are at the end of their lives. She takes in cats that are nearing the end of their life.
Oh my God.
I know, it's a beautiful, and so it's a nonprofit, and she often needs funds for food or bedding or whatever, but it's a beautiful, When I
Wow.
found out about it, it was like, because we all want to love an animal when they're great.
Right, right, right,
What
right.
about when they're, when they're nearing the end, and to, it's like a hospice nurse taking in an animal that's getting ready to pass means you're going to be attached and it's going to leave. That's a, yeah, that's a, so Mish, I love you, girl. That's
Yes,
an
yes,
amazing.
Carol. My puppies are actually ESAs as well. They're registered as well.
Yeah, I didn't get that for Phoebe Ann, and I don't know the process of that, but I know that the next Greyhound will definitely be an ESA. Um, tonight, my guest has been John Michael Lander, an incredibly kind overcomer.
Mhm.
What was it? We talked about Sir Thriver. Wasn't that the word we came up with? Sir Thriver.
Survivor. Okay, yeah.
A survivor and a thriver. Um, so John Michael, I will, your quotes are out there. The article I'll post. If there's anything else you want us to know, like where can we find you? We've got your email, but where can we find you as far as, do you have Instagram, Facebook,
I have
TikTok?
all of those tweets, Instagram, Facebook. I'm on all of those platforms. Um, I also have a website called anathletesilence.com, and that you can see everything about what's going on with me at this moment.
Okay. Will you post that under the once we're not live? Will
Right.
you post a couple of those links and things like that? Okay. Um. So you have been tuned in. You have been listening to Love Over Coffee, Voices Not Heard. This is a platform and a podcast for the marginalized, the silenced, and the abused. If you are a creator, reach out to me. If you're interested in the self talk session that John Michael is offering, please reach out and I can hook you two up. Um, Reach out if you have a question, a comment, a concern, a thought. And by all means, I challenge each of you, if you have been silent and you wish to share your story, please reach out. And we will do it with the utmost of kindness and care. And at the same time, I also challenge you to go have a cup of coffee, a conversation with someone who doesn't look like you, think like you, believe like you. And that way, you can learn from another's lived experiences. And even if you leave the conversation and you didn't grow from what they told you, perhaps you will grow from your own reflection of it as you process. So there's a lot of division in the world, and I believe that a good cup of coffee, and tonight my coffee cup says hope, and I do believe that it does provide some hope in the world if we can come together over a good conversation. So, thank you, John Michael. It's always exciting to see you. I hope that next time I'm in Louisville, maybe you can come from Ohio. Maybe we can figure out how to get with Kathleen, um,
Oh,
get the old gang together. And it doesn't have to be over coffee. Listen, I can have a, margarita. So I want to
awesome.
say, I want to say thank you. Please kiss the puppies for me. And oh my goodness, they are so adorable. Now is that Bandit?
This is Bear.
Oh, Bear.
Yeah,
Well,
Bandit had to go into the other room. She got a little vocal.
you said they
So
were twins.
they
So
are.
it's like when I had twins in school. It was like took me a while to figure it out, but after a while you do. Thank you again, John Michael. Another great
Thank you.
conversation, and thank you to all who are listening and watching. Please be sure to like, share, comment, and watch. I'm looking for more subscribers on the YouTube channel. So that's it. Um, I am still confirming my guest for next week, but I believe it is going to be a young gentleman in England that has endured anxiety and alopecia, and what he has been doing to again bring that conversation to the forefront so that he is not silent, because he's all over TikTok. Um, Bandit and Bear,
Yep.
you guys are adorable.
Yay!
So, all right, let me end the podcast. Hold on, John Michael. Let's see. I'm going to end it now. Thank you, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you.
See you next Tuesday at 9.